Okay, this is a real quick rundown of how to render within Blender. I went ahead and made a scene here that has our little friend Suzanne and just a plane underneath her, so I had something for shadows to bounce off of. So here's my scene. If I want to quickly switch to camera view, I use the letter 0 on the number pad, so that quickly shows your view from the camera that's in the scene. So right now, this is what my scene looks like. If you need to adjust the camera, like if you want to move it just like you move any other viewport, you want to come up to, there should be a little pull out over here on the side. You want to go to view, and you want to make sure this checkbox camera to view is selected. That way you can move your camera just like you would at the viewport. Okay, so right now I've got a picture of Suzanne. I made my plane large enough so that it can go outside the bounds of what's going to be rendered. So if I really just want to quickly see what this looks like as is, I'm going to come up here to the top bar and say render, render image. You can also say function F12. That will also get this for you. So it looks a little funky right now. This is just the default keyboard, and I just made a bunch of noise in the background. Sorry, I was scooting my chair. Okay, so we don't really have any shaders. This is all the defaults right now. So by default, the light has shadows. By default, this is the shaders. So it's not really that interesting yet. So let's make this prettier. Okay, I'm gonna close that. So first of all, I'm gonna make Suzanne shade smooth. But I'm also going to add some subdivisions on her just to make this prettier. So let me go there to modifiers, subdivision surface. I'm going to make her a little smoother, make her a little prettier. Isn't that nice, Suzanne? All right. So now I should get a little bit of a nicer render here. Smoother image. All right. So there's where we're at right now. So the first thing I really want to do is I need to apply what are called shaders. So these are what tell the software, hey, this is what this object is supposed to look like. This is how it interacts with light. So on Suzanne, I'm going to click on Suzanne, and then I'm going to go to material. It's this checker ball that's red. And it's, if you hover over it, it says material properties. So another word for shader is materials. You will probably see it used interchangeably. So we're just going to add a new material. So I have my guy, Suzanne, selected. I'm going to say new. And when I click new, it creates a new shader. So by default, what we have is called principled BSDF. If you want to have a different type of shader, just click in here. For now, BSDF is fine. When you look at all of the settings, it has a ton. So don't get super overwhelmed. So the first thing we have to worry about is this base color. So let's make my monkey blue. Okay. Now it's not going to show up in the viewport like that because I need to change the way my viewport is set up. So I'm going to set it up to viewport shading. So now you can see the blue monkey. Maybe that's a little too blue. Let's make her, yeah, that works. Okay, now you can kind of see a preview of what these materials are going to behave like. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff going on here. Don't get too concerned with a lot of these. I just want to point out a few. One of those things is specular. So that is how much light is reflected off our object. So as I turn it up, you're going to notice there is more highlights happening. Okay. But right now my highlights are super broad. Okay. Maybe I want to make them a little crisper. So I want to use roughness for that. So if I turn roughness down, my surface becomes shinier and you can see those highlights becoming a lot more shiny. Now what you see here reflected here is the default environment map. Don't worry about this too much. I know the Fox tutorial, you actually do change your environment map, but we can leave it as is for now. I don't want it that crazy. If I make it super rough, it gets more matte. You can see. Let's make it kind of shiny. All right. What else do I want to point out here? Alpha, of course, is your transparency. You can play around with a lot of these. Subsurface is going to make your render times really high, but essentially what this does is it adds a level of translucency, like there's a color underneath. So in the areas that are thinner, you're going to see that color shine through. You do have to kind of turn it on, but it's up under here under subsurface. So you can see it kind of mixes that pink in. So this is like how when you put your hand over a flashlight and you can see the light coming through your hand, it's kind of like that. Those of you who are doing the donut project, you probably want to have subsurface. The reason being is that food is slightly translucent. Light bounces off the inside of it and it looks more appetizing. It looks less plastic. Okay, so that's just an option. I'm going to turn that off for now. Okay, so let's go up here and render my image so far. I got a super shiny monkey and I've got some really nice shadows happening. Okay, I also want to create a shader for my backdrop here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, go over to the surfacing and say new. I think I just want this to be like a light pink or something. Not anything too fancy. So I'm going to render again. Render, excuse me. Okay, and so we get this nice little scene happening. So that's essentially how this works. You want to add materials to all your objects. If you want to, let me go to a different view here. No, well, I need to get out of this camera view. Okay, if you want to, you can actually move your light around. And you can see how it's affected by turning on this render shade or this shading or render shading. Okay, so you can move your light around and see how it affects your object. Okay, it may, help add some drama. Just like any other object, you can actually add more lights. I know there's other tutorials that do that. So you say Shift A. I'm going to go down to lights. Let's try an area light. Make it come up. I'm going to scale it. And then when you have the lights, you can come over here on the properties and you can even change the type of light that it is. You can make it more powerful. You can change the colors. So you can get like this really pretty thing going on. Am I even above my subject here? Okay. You can change the point light to do that too. You can also tell it whether or not you want it to show shadows. If you have multiple light sources, you probably want to shut off shadows so it doesn't get too weird. Now, another thing I want to point out is how crisp these shadows are. So in order to make that less crispy or make it softer, you can change the radius of the light. So if you come here and change the radius and make it bigger, it will soften the edge of those shadows. It's like diffusing it. So like in photography when you have a diffuser. Okay, it softens up those shadows. All right, another thing I want to point out is the renderer that is doing this, the software. So if I come over to scene properties, I'm right now using the render engine Eevee. Now, I'm sure it's named after the Pokemon, which is adorable, but Eevee is a much faster renderer. It doesn't get as much details. It's really only used for games or for previews. I know some people really, really love Eevee, but if you really want to work it up a notch, you want to switch this render engine to cycles. So you notice that it actually calculates things differently. Okay, it's doing different passes. It's running through all these pixels, and it's going to look a little pixelated until it's complete with its rendering. But you notice there is quite a difference between the two. So I'm going to just render this image, and you can see as soon as it decides to go just how much softer, how much nicer this render is. And it's just going to take forever to run. So now if you want to save your renders, you can say image. Well, it's not doing it until it's done, I guess. Okay, so the bigger you make these and the higher resolution and the more bells and whistles you put on this, the more time it's going to take to render. So please be aware of that when you are creating these. So if you want to make this less awful, you can lower your samples. Okay, you can also make the GPU work. I don't know if these Macs want to do that, but we can make our samples less. I don't know, let's do like 1024. Okay, might make our time a little bit nicer. See, it's still going. It says it has, well, it's almost done. So samples do go up. Okay, so we have our completed render. It took a while, so please be aware of that. We want to, now that it's finished, we want to save as, and then I'm just going to say Suzanne test, save her on the desktop. From here, you can actually change like the image type, the compression, all that good stuff. So we may also want to change our, how big this render is. So we want to go back to our camera. We're going to select the box that our camera is. I'm going to go back to this one so it's less hard on my poor computer. And I'm going to go to the data, the camera settings. So right here, you can see, you can change what type of render it is, the focal length of the camera, etc., etc. You can change your background images. You can turn on safe area. So if you're making a film, okay, so you can mess with all the camera settings here. So if you want to change the size of the renders, you can come in here under output properties, and you'll change the resolution. Right now, that's 1080p. That's perfectly fine. You can also change what type of output is going to happen when it renders. Okay. So in a nutshell, this is basic rendering within Blender. Of course, you can always get a lot more detailed, if you have specific questions, you can always look them up or ask me. But that's essentially what we're working with here. I hope this was helpful.